It's Sunday afternoon. It's actually very pretty here. And I'll go a little bit out of order. I wanted to do a call to the podcast Tefillah because today happens to be the 20th Sivan, very famous date, and whose account of a date of tragedy. Many prayers and compositions were composed over the centuries. The first Sivan, and you can go back to the old podcast if you don't know what I'm talking about. Those are dates basically of two big tragedies. There are others. Two famous ones. One is the Kadoshi blew up back at the time of Rabbeinu Tam around 1170 or so, when the whole town was killed out in France. And secondly, the Gzeres Tachbatat Khmelnytsky. Notice when the Ukrainians massacred the Jews. Maybe not supposed to say that now because everybody's in favor of the Ukraine, but this is what was going on at that time. Now, the history at that time is not what I'm talking about. Rather, the liturgical results of that. That's why it's a tefillah. And therefore, we're going to call this a podcast film. And thank, as always, Mishpachas Stefanski for being the sponsors. When these tragedies happened long ago, people were still very frum. They wrote all kind of kinos, slichos, and things like that. There's a famous one from Rabbeinu Tam and from Ephraim of Regensburg, Oy Vavoy, it's called, and things like that. But I want to call your attention, especially if I can mix together liturgy and history, with a very famous poem which used to be recited once upon a time in the shuls in Sivan, accompanied by all kind of, it's kind of a Megillah, not exactly, from the Shach. It's called Megillah Sefer. Now that means that the Shach who lived in Poland this time, now he was not where Khmelnytsky was. He was in Vilna. That's all the way up in the north west. And the Khmelnytsky Kazakhs was mainly in the southeast. Some of them penetrated up there, but the tragedy and type of the Shach had to do with the Russian invasion, which came in the wake of the Ukrainian uprising. I won't bore you with the history. But nevertheless, he was a Polish Jew, the Shach. At that time, there was no such thing as Litvaks, the Galicianos, and all that. The whole Eastern Europe was called the Kingdom of Poland, or if you want to be technical, the Noble Republic of Poland-Lithuania, which was a monarchy of a certain sort. And therefore, if Jews were killed anywhere, and plenty were, it was felt everywhere throughout Eastern Europe. And so, the Shach, the famous Shach, wrote a Megillah, as he calls it, called Megillah Sefer. It's a little bit based on Megillah Sofa, and Zechariah rather. And the point is that he's giving a description. So here you have kind of like a keynote, but much more historically graphic. It's actually fascinating. And nobody says this anymore in shuls. But once upon a time, they used to recite this. At least to my knowledge. What do I know? As far as I'm aware, nobody recites it. It's a historical document most people not familiar with. Me, myself, and I, if you get this edition, and I'm holding in my hand, those of you in the video can see this, which is from many years ago, the Yevei Metzula with Nikudos, which came out, I don't know, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, a long time ago. Actually, it's from Toronto. I can't believe it. Tufshin Nonalf, 1991. So they also include in the back, as I'm holding in my hand, the Megillah Sefer from the Shach, Menukad. And it's too long to go through the whole thing, but I do want to do at least parts of it. And so today, which is Chav Sivan, which sadly is just not remembered. Most people don't even remember it's Chav Sivan, things like that. If it was a day that you skipped Tachnun, people would remember it. But it's the reverse. It's a day, if anything, that people would fast, recite extra slichas. That part's gone. I'm told that the Hungarians, after the Holocaust, Ungarsha Rabbanim, revived Chav Sivan slichos and things like that. But I don't know. So, as I said, this document, this poem, or keynote, whatever you want to call it, is about 15, 20 pages long. I don't have the time to go through all that. Neither do you. Within the framework of this, I'm going to share with you pieces and highlights. And you'll see that the Shach, first of all, is a great writer, but second of all, really tries to be very historical and tell you exactly what happened. It's quite remarkable, okay? And again, skipping the first part, He says, B'shnas Shchmei Shalofim Tal Me'ah Shema Brias Table Shchakim. That's a poem. The year 1648. B'chodesh Harishon Hu Chodesh Nisan Godlo Dimas Ashukin. Then the tears of the oppressed rose up. Obviously, as a rabbinical writer, he's going to use a lot in his poetry, a lot of snatches of psukim from the Tanakh. Okay, and I don't want to go and explain each and every one. I hope you, the listener, will understand many of them. Ki izchilu oz harekim lekabetz lezanev v'nechshon mishoshanos amokan. That the rekim, the empty ones, which is the Cossacks, the Ukrainians. According to him, he's a Polish Jew, the Shah, living in 1600s in the golden age of the Jews of Poland. So the Jews in Poland were on the side of the Poles. They're against the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians want to kill the Jews and kill thousands of them. And so to him, they're the rekim. They're the empty people. His chila rekim, they started to gather together, lezanev hanechsholim, and to kill some stragglers. You know, like we say about Amalek. Vayargu chasidi elin kadoshim tzadikim b'chashukin. So they started to murder Yidden from people. Kama meis nefashos kadoshas, hundreds. This is the beginning of the uprising in Nisan, he says, of 1648. Evyonim anechim v'nenokim. Poor people who cried out and were crushed. Vayitzo negdom sarm rabim am rabim hapolakin. And then he gives you the history. The Polish organized an army to go fight them. To fight these empty people, the Ukrainians, the Kazakhs, and pay them back. And when the Polish army came close to the Kazakh camp, this really happened. I think it's called the Battle of Kherson. El Eretz HaTameim, Hanikra Ukrainia, is what he was saying, to the land of the Tameim, which they call Ukraine, right? Then the Cossacks came with trickery towards them. And what he's going to describe, it's so funny that the Shach is writing this in a tefillah, in a Megillah. He's going to give you the cause historically why the Poles lost, and that is that there were whole regiments in the Polish army composed of Kazakhs, and they went over to the other side. The Kazakhs were actually Ukrainians who were formed in special regiments that were supposed to serve the Polish army. And here, because it was the Ukrainian uprising, they switched sides, and he thinks that's terrible. Even those Rekim, those the Ukrainians, who were assigned in their books, in their own Bibles. It's been a long-standing rule in the law books of Poland that every year 12,000 Cossacks, no, there's 12 regiments of 1,000 apiece, would be in the Polish army to serve the king of Poland wherever he wants. And now they broke their promise. And they cut a deal with Khmelnytsky, Achem, who they were related to. And they brought in the Goyim, the Muslims, the Tatars, to join them against the Poles. And they surrounded the Polish general with all of his officers and men. And they killed them all and took their money. Many other generals were killed too. It was Shavuos time. I don't know exactly what he means by it. It was some Christian holiday at that time. But Yom Revi Muchal Parosim. It was a Wednesday. Okay? Meanwhile, in another part of Poland, far away, those down here, the Jews were getting killed, the Shach is telling us, and massacred. Far away elsewhere, the king of Poland was dying. But Medina's Lita, Rachok, Ma'od, Me'eretz, Ukraine, and Medina also. So the king was in his area in Lithuania, and he died far away. That means that Poland now doesn't have a king. And he died in Vilna. And when he was dying, it was right when this started, so he never even heard, the news never reached him that the Cossacks are uprising. And so the point the Shach is making is, if you're Jewish, southeastern Poland. Don't expect any help because the government doesn't even know that the Kazakhs are killing everybody. The Kazakhs didn't know the king was dying. We, the Jewish people, Am Hashem, Avodov, Tzon Mar Iso, Hanafotzim Dinis Lita. We are living in Lithuania. Vilna. We were crying over the death of the king who was a friend of the Jews. We also didn't know about the terrible disaster that Hashem was bringing on his people. Meanwhile, we didn't know, but down there they knew. And everybody fled their house if they had any seichel and got on a horse or just started walking to run away, not to fall in the hands of the Cossacks. They tossed all their money, their mashkins, their land. All they had was their body. Maybe they were able to take a little bit of money to buy food. And the Shach is saying in a mournful tone that on Shavuos people were traveling because there's a Pekuch Nefesh. So just like when the Germans came World War II, remember I said that Shabina Rav had to drive on Shabbos, get out of there. So these guys are running away if they could get a horse and wagon on Shavuos. Because they were under hechrach, they were forced by circumstances to run away and to try to stand off the enemy. Shabbos chagenu moadenu, and therefore our holiday of Shavuos, Shabbos, ceased. Asher kol adas Yisrael yasu. So it's supposed to be that the whole Kol Yisrael does it, but now it ended. Rabim nosel nikak Nemirov, and many fled to Nemirov, which was a very chashuv Jewish city. And again, there was no telephones at that time, so nobody knew that the king was dead. And they were hoping and davening that the king of Poland by now will have heard about it and sent an army to rescue us, and they weren't aware that there was no king of Poland, he was dead. We were davening to Hashem, Yishlach Ezreinu al-Yidei HaMelech b'amrav v'makilos, that Hashem should send us a Yeshua in the person of the Polish army led by the king. But when they heard news hit them that the king is dead and there is no king, v'yisatzu ma'od, v'yivku b'tachnunim b'tfilos, v'dimosam alech yosam tamid, v'yikonunu kinos v'yololos, v'yiru kikos le'mra minor aliyos. They saw up the creek that that Hashem has designated them for trouble, for massacre. The Ukrainians, when they heard the king of Poland was dead, samchu simchas gedolos. All the Polish side, the Goyim, got scared, and they were seized by terror. We couldn't go on the roads, like in Shiras Devora. The highways became impossible. 50 Cossacks showed up sneaky at Nemirov. And they started blowing on trumpets and shofars. And it was a fake. They came and they made the Polish sounds, the trumpet sounds, so that the people in Nemirov would think that the army of rescue is coming to save them, including the Jews. And they will open the gates for what they expect is the army of rescue, but instead it'll come in the Cossacks. The Shach says it was a Maisis Satan, they did other things, and they were able to come in there and start killing everybody, especially the Jews. They killed 6,000 Jews. They just stabbed everybody and cut them up. Kedoshim, Gaonim, Rabbonim, Chachamim, Nevonim, Zekanim, Yeshishim, Bachurim, Besulas, Chasonim, Vekalos, Tuf, Venoshim. Ubefrat, Hagon Marina, Rabbi Yechiel Michal, Chacham Charashim, and the Rav, who apparently was a big gadol, Yechiel Michal, Vekama Meis Tova B'mayim, and they drowned. In other words, the Cossacks had fun. So they didn't simply kill them. They drowned a lot of people in the moat. and all kind of tortures. And they slit the throats of the Meshorim. You see, this is Poland in the old days. They used to have choirs. Isn't that funny? A Meshorim means a chazan. It has two guys on the side, one on this side, one on that side. That's the old school, before Reform Judaism started. These have Meshorim. So they shechted with chalafas, with their swords, might even mean the shochet knives. This is the Kazakh's idea of a sick joke. In front of the Aron Kodesh, the chazonim, the shamash, and the Meshorim. Sham hel ben Israel orlos with karbonis vishim. And that's where the Jewish people offered up a lot of karbonis. Oktu atzim ke'ilim kvasim tioshim. It's as if they did an akeda over there, tied him up. L'reich nichoch yalashochin tashishin. Now, it might mean that the Cossacks tied him up and they had fun with him before they killed him. So there was a kind of a kedas yitzhak, but in a sick dog way. V'yachar kain, after they killed everybody, hechriva beis migdash mat, they burned the shul down. Sham shagud tzarm barokshim, they screamed. V'otziu kol sefer Torahs, and to desecrate, they took out all the sefer Torahs. Yeshanim gam chadashim, the old ones and the new ones. This is all from the Shach. Ukara'um, and they tore him ligzarm, they ripped him up. When the son lemir masragli adam, they put on the ground, people should trample on them. Adum b'behema susim b'parshin. Parshim are riders. V'gamasim and sandol and minolim, and they took the parchments of the Sefer Torah, they used them to plug up their shoes, if there are any holes. Shakor and paspal, b'kamin lebushim, and all kind of other articles of clothing were made from various parts of the Sefer Torahs. V'hachu aksav la'aretz, and they, on purpose, as a sign of contempt, turned the Torah down, the ksav facing the ground, and trampled on the Urias on purpose to show their hatred for the Jews and their hatred for the Torah. Okay? Everything I'm talking about happened on Yom Ravi. Esrim Yom L'Chodesh Sivan. That's today. The massacre in Nemirov, which apparently left a big rosham on the Shach, although it's not the only place it was killed, shook him up, and he said, it was on a Wednesday, Chav Sivan, Yerech HaGimel B'chol Min Shlishin, Yom Shenit Lubo HaMaores, Chaser Ksiv. It's when, it must say, in the Chumash, I guess, Shnei Ma'oris Agdolos, maybe it's missing a Vav, so Ma'or becomes Me'era, he says. Yom Me'era Klola Yodem Cha'ashin. Notice the absence of the Vav makes it Me'era, curse, instead of Me'ora, light. And that's his way of saying it was foredestined from time of Shesha Me'breshis that there's going to be a chasarn in the Me'or and upbuilding in the Me'era. There's going to be an unlucky day for Klal Yisrael. Shagam Gzeris, this is all the Shach talking, not me. Shagam Gzeris Tatkala, Hoyz B'yomahu Esrim L'Kodesh Shehu, Bo Hoyu Nichlam Ben Boshim. The famous Gezerah from the time of the Rabbeinu Tam in Taskala in 1171 also happened on that day on the 20th of Sivan. Bo Hoyu Nichlam Boshim. It's the day when we were full of Busha Chalima, of shame. And that is why he's saying that this should be read. Hinei Akihila Kedosha. Now you should know that this Nemirov, this town we just described, the massacre, it was only the beginning. It wasn't the only one they did. When we showed the photos of penny arts, the Kazakhs spread all over the place, by the Russian, and there were many leaders of Kazakh regiments. So each one did his own massacres. Harosha Echad Yifne Al Kills Kol Tolchin. One group, like we would say today, a flying column, a moving army of Kazakhs, went to the town of Tulchin, and they surrounded and besieged the place for 8 days. And besieged everybody was starving. And there were a lot of Jews there, and a lot of Polish nobles. And they were fighting off the Cossacks 24/7. And then the Cossacks spoke to the Sarma Pritzim, to the Polish. Loma Tirgishu
Tirgishu Goyim, Limbashal Yehudim, Mlaim. Why do you guys have to fear and fight on behalf of these damn Jews? HaYehudim Amlolim. Hashem Soneim Yam Kadim. They've been the enemies of Christians way back when. But Dibralim Dwarm Rachim and Digri and they spoke to the Poles soft words to seduce them to surrender the Jews. We're only going against the Jews. We have nothing against you, you Polacks. We're going to leave you alone. Let us just hand over to us the Jews who deny Christianity. And we'll drink over them a kos shel tanchumen. And we'll do what we want to the Jews. And we'll gore them like you do karnarim, like an ox gores. It's just poetically saying we'll massacre them. But you, the Goyim, will leave alone. The Poles believe them. So the Polacks carried out what the Cossacks suggested. And they gave over the Bnei Yehuda men apartment, meaning the Chashva leaders of the Jewish Kehillah. And the Cossacks proceeded to massacre 3,000 Jews. Some of them they just beat up and struck and killed that way with blows. And some they wounded and let them die that way. All the bodies of the Jews were given over to all kind of Yisurim and terrible sufferings. And they went to work on the Jews with every type of weapon. They went to work on them, and you can see this in movies. They still do this in Ukraine. They went to work on the Jews with axes, with saws, with plows. You get what I'm saying? So no, they didn't just like shoot them in the back of the head. That's a quickie. They threw down people on the ground and plowed over them. This. I'll just give you one more. This was Tuesday on a Friday. That's an expression. Dalid Yamim L'Chodesh Tammuz. This is the 4th of Tammuz. Asher Bonish Dabar Luchos. Benig Zurim Batumim. I guess he means that it was the month of Tammuz, which is a bad luck in Jewish history, because as you and I know, in Shavasa B'Tammuz, they made the Egel. They were Nishtabar Luchos and the Urim Batumim. And everybody could see there's a Gzar Din from upstairs that's hanging over the Jews. On that day, we had 2 Gzeras. In one town, they killed 1,500 Jews. All the way up near where I live. In Russia, he says, far from Tulchin, Shim Parso, Shem Resurim, about 70 parsos away. But Parshas Vayinashchus on Bayomas Amram B'Yisrael Amritzurim. So, the same parsha where they read from Bamidbar, like reading now, that people die from the Mesonim and from the Kibbutz Atayva and all that. So that's bad luck. People are dying like that now. But no, the Yediyah Brura, Be'emes Tomim, K'osam Yehudim Asher Kirs Hamiyah, Skrum B'Chasun. The Jews in this place, Homiyah, were locked up in a good fortress. Kishu Hashem Amyucha, Yosem Shem Tzadikim Chachamim. They made a Kiddush Hashem more than anybody else. Basher Gam Sham Bo Arekim Atamim Keklov Malimim. The Cossacks came in like wild dogs. Bebrisim Sharprisim. Again, they cut a deal with the Poles to sell out the Jews. And they hand over the Jews like you would hand over a keves to be shechted. That's what they did was they physically expelled the Jews from the walled city, so they had to run away in the open areas. Also, the Cossacks surrounded all the Jews out in the open fields with a big circle, and they stripped them all, and they threw everybody in the ground, a little bit like Hitler, And the Jews were all ashamed. The men, the women, the children were all stripped naked. It's like a sheep getting ready to be shechted, or a sheep, what should I say, to be sheared. But as Dibra Arekim Al Yehudim Dvarim Tom Nechumim. And basically, what they said was like this: if you convert, you will survive. Why should you go and be shechted like animals? For your God? Your God is the one bringing on you, obviously, all these sorrows. Why do you want to suffer for Him? Better to convert to Christianity and worship our idols. Let's all be one people, and we'll live together in peace. And you live and you'll go off well. We'll even give you your money back if you convert. But to Hashem go some Ramim. It'll be big print, you'll go back to being rich. But I want to tell you what the Shach says. These from Jews, who belong to a people who call a Yamim. Throughout their history have been Neragam Hashem, have been martyred for Hashem. They all rejected Olam Hazeh. Bachurim, Besulis, Zekanim, Savim, Ulamim, old, young men, women. They all gathered together. Hashem Mumim. Old people with children have no moments. But start crying out to Hashem, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Melech Olamim. That's quite a scene. They're reciting the Shema all stark naked. Ki Alecha Ragna Kol Yom Elohei Habasamim Lo Neishe B'Meisei Shav. We're not going to be together with these goyim. V'lo Navo Im Nalamim V'Svado Chatazim Aval Shanachnom. And they all did al chet. Aval Hashem Anach. They all did al chet. V'Tzit Kulim Zadin. And they said, we deserve it. Asur Tam and Palo. V'Ikon's kids Rabba also became Shemam. And they cried their heads off. Right? V'Yikashero Arekim. Ki Yehudim Ben Osam Shlamim. And when the Cossacks saw the Jews were going to stay Jewish, Ya'anum Azos V'Dibram Gizumim, then they started really screaming at them. Ad Mosei Takshu Archem. How can you be so stubborn? Tamas Ladas, and you're committing suicide. V'Ti Shocha Damim. Ki Atem Ba'asmechem. Mesab Merigasam. You're causing your own death. Because we're willing to let you go. Atem Agorm Lechem Ariga, Shchita, V'Tasu Zebach Kol Yamim. B'She'enchem Chavetz Lambodas Aleinu Harim Ram. If you don't want to worship our God, you could. It's a choice you're making. Yehudim, and the Jews said, Lo matachul argenu. Why are you taking your time? Let's get this over with. Why are you ma'achir in l'argenu? Halo lo nishma kolchem. We're not going to listen to you. V'lo nomer l'maisi yadeinu Eloheinu. Ki echad Elohim b'shamayim v'aretz Hashem malkeinu mosheinu. V'atem ha'yom shluchim eito yisbarach l'vkom nashatzenu. Obviously, Hashem has chosen you to be the ones to kill us. That's a fact. Hashem assigns bad acts to bad actors. So you guys must be a bunch of jerks. And so here the Shach is quoting from the Gemara, This is poetical. I don't know if it's exactly these words. And you're the ones who are going to burn in hell. So then the leader of the Cossacks raised his hand, like, no, let's start killing now. Vayargo samba bonenu, vayar hereg rab bachenu b'nei brisenu, bonenu b'bnosenu b'norenu uzakenenu u'shalom lavuz shal garo yashlicha b'chutzes kaspenu. They threw the money all over the place. Kirov ashirei Eretz Ukrainia baruch shamal shar Yehudim. Right? Most of the rich Jews had run away to that place. Because they said their fellow Jews will help us. And they were all in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so he's just describing to you, as I said before, it goes on for another 5-6 pages. I just wanted to give you a taste of this. And maybe you'll make your business go online. I don't know, maybe someone's going online somewhere or whatever. But he, of course, says that therefore you should make a permanent fast over here. The Shach concludes, notice you should read this. And he says, I'm skipping a bunch of pages to get to the end. Al ken kavati liasmi l'dorasai lebanim b'nei banim. I'm making a personal shavua for my descendants. Yom Tzom B'Tainis Evel Misbed V'Kinim Yom Chaf L'Chodesh Sivan Shabo Nitna Torah Yikor B'Bninim. The day that the Torah was given in the month of Sivan, in other words, was the 20th of it. And the Sefer Torah that was given to Har Sinai is now ripped up by these Goyim. Since the 20th of Sivan was the first massacre, and it's a day of bad luck in Jewish history because they had other kilkuls. Happened at the time of the Kadoshi Blah of Tam Rabbeinu Tam. Begam ki Yom Zeh Lo Yer B'Shabbos Kodeshim Panim. Plus, Chaf Siva never falls out on a Saturday. Al Pi Akviyas Ol B'Shub Mitzkan. I know the calendar. Chibarti Slichas Bekinas Bebechi V'Sachnunin Lo Amram B'Yom Zeh B'Chol Shana B'Shana Idam V'Danin. So, like I said before, the rest you can, there's about 4 or 5 extra pages in this, and if it's something that entries you could say Chaf Sivan, you'll take a look at yourself. This is one of those cases where this did not enter the liturgy. There were places that certain slichas, all the rest of it. I've heard and I've seen that there used to be some keolis that they read the Megillah Sefer, and you can understand it's very evocative. It's a little bit like the Book of Maccabees in a negative way, obviously. But you see how strongly they took the Chaf Sivan. And anyway, since today is Chaf Sivan, I wanted to mention that. So once again, I want to thank Mishpachas Stefanski as always, and I hope you'll have a good week.